So optional keywords are very important. So that's another issue. Keywords రాయకుండా 3-4 లైన్స్ టైం కష్టపడకూడదు. ఇంకొకటి థింకర్స్ ఇందులో వాడాలి కదా, యూస్ థింకర్స్ ఫర్ దిస్ టాపిక్. ఒక్క ట్విట్టర్ కూడా రికార్డ్ చేస్తారు అది టెలిగ్రామ్ లో ఐ సెండ్ ఇన్ వాట్సాప్ పర్సనల్ వాట్సాప్. ఓకే సార్ వచ్చేసి yes Vinay is also here. Yes Vinay, can you hear us? You can post in chat and confirm. Vinay, can you hear us? Sir, all this is you know, run. Just check with you. So thinkers, you are not able to recall.
విషయం మీరు కూడా మధ్యలో సో ఇప్పుడు ఈ వీక్ కూడా సెకండ్ పేపర్ థింకర్స్ ప్రాపర్ గా రివిజన్ చేస్తాం. థింకర్స్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ ఎందుకంటే కాన్సెప్ట్ అంటే ఒక్క డబుల్ ఐ థింక్ బైలింగ్ అండ్ డిసైడ్ తప్పు రాసాను.
ఓకే ఫైన్.
డబుల్ డిసైడ్ రాదు సార్ బైలింగ్, అది ఆఫ్టర్ రైటింగ్ డిలైజ్. అది కాన్సెప్ట్స్ మోస్ట్లీ గుర్తొస్తుంది సార్, కానీ థింకర్స్ కానీ ఎలా స్టార్ట్ చేయాలి, డెఫినేషన్స్ keywords, examples, nothing. So, అంటే చదవాలని అనుకున్నా కానీ బట్ ఏం లేదు మైండ్ లో అయితే అసలు అనేబుల్ లేదు.
మీరమ్మా, how did you feel? You Suresh?
చాలా థింకర్స్ రాసాను సార్. కొన్ని థింకర్స్ మంచిగా
okay. Suresh generally he doesn't have issue with memory. That's what I've seen in my previous scripts. Yes, thinkers are all there. So three of you can learn from each other. His content is good, your presentation is good. So you wrote a lot from thinkers and all the, but it was not optimal. You could have used better thinkers, more thinkers to make the point. One question where I found it very evident is a question on religion. Approaches to study religion. That question, your content needs a lot of improvement. Especially, there was no Durkheim. You wrote about Radcliffe Brown and Malinowski, isn't it? You cannot write, if you write religion answer without talking about Durkheim, that is telling examiner I have not understood religion. Because Durkheim is the most important person in entire discussion on religion. So, if you write an answer on religion and come out without talking about Durkheim, that's the clear telling the examiner that see I have memorized, but I have no sense of what is important. Okay, so that happens to a lot of Anthro students. Some topics there is no sense of importance because you are writing notes, remembering keywords, examples, and trying to reproduce with very little understanding. So make sure that when you are writing it, you should have a sense of priority. Which thinker should not be missed. So in religion, Durkheim, if you listen, that's a big blunder. So you cannot. Okay. Now, you get a coffee. If I just give you the paper notes. So first, it was not very difficult paper. I intentionally tried to include questions familiar but conceptual, like sacred and profane. It's a very familiar question. Many Anthro students do not understand the importance of sacred and profane. In fact, this is the biggest contribution Durkheim has made to the study of religion. And Durkheim is a functionalist. So, I wanted to see if even in the basic conceptual questions, how do you fare? The first test was on the difficult side. Second test, I wanted to see if the challenge of unknown questions is removed. How will your content come? That's the reason I intentionally tried to make it familiar, or whatever questions are not familiar, they will analytical. like human rights and cultural relativism, and on so on. But even here, if your content is not coming the way it's supposed to come, then in other areas it will be even more difficult because it's the easiest part of the entire syllabus, isn't it?
Yes.
The whole Anthro syllabus, this is the easiest part compared to physical anthro, archaeology, even paper 2. Because in paper 2, you can't have such organized content. You must develop and generate flow. Here there is no such problem. Right? So, in optional, it's very clear. Any topic you remember in terms of keywords, headings, thinkers, diagrams. In paper 2, you can use, of course, in both these examples. In paper 2, case studies will come. And in paper 2, some data can come. This is how your answer must be. So, and to be able to do this, you must do all of this prior to the writing the test itself. You must have your notes must have all of this already. You should not be generating this at the time of examination. Then you will be slow. You must be able to have notes where all of this is in one place. At least a rough draft. Then the content must automatically flow. And this is doable for optional. For GS, I understand. It's more difficult to imagine a structure and a scope for GS. But optional, it's quite clear what is asked. In Anthro, it is the most clear because questions repeat. For sure, you'll understand how lucky you are if you talk to first year students. Their papers, almost 30-40% of the papers have entirely new questions, even an optional. For you, the challenge is not there. Almost 90% of what you can attempt using choice are questions which have been asked previously. This is almost like group 1 paper, group 1 level paper, optional, in entire scheme. Because whatever you prepare is going to be asked. So you must leverage the most out of this. That can be done by organized preparation. That's the issue. And when I'm expecting an answer, legibility is something that is unforgivable. So if your scripts are not legible and if they don't look neat, they will not get the marks they deserve. So, and I'm not telling you to have toppers who got good scores with writing like yours. But they at least made sure they work to make sure the writing looks neat when it is put on paper. That's the issue. So if you look at legibility, find words which are creating a problem. Try to change the way you write those words. Font size, in your case, font size is an issue. And in your case, spacing is an issue. You can use improved spacing between the words to make the same look neat. So use these ideas to make it neat. Okay? With that, we will look at the questions and briefly I'll give you outlines. And for any question, study any question in terms of a framework. That will make it easy. If you study a question in terms of framework, that will make it easy. Religion and magic. First, definition of both, then similarities, and then differences with corresponding thinkers. Where is the difficulty here? Even in this question, for example, in your script, I think the key word is manipulation versus supplication. One is about manipulating the supernatural, the other is about being supplicated to the supernatural. So when I look at the answer for religion magic, this is like the bare minimum expectation. That's the thing, that's how optional is different from GS. In GS, the examiner has lower expectations of what should be there in the answer. But this is a conceptual paper. So they expect religion and magic, this must be there. So that terminology, thank you. Thank you. So that terminology is very, very important. Getting the terminology right. Okay. each subject, each optional subject has its own terminology, and if you don't write it, it's a blunder. And each concept must be expressed in terms of the corresponding keywords. That's what I meant by keywords. So manipulation and supplication are keywords for religion and magic. How can you ignore it? And thinkers. When you're writing religion and magic, the minimum thinkers are Fraser, at least Raymond Firth, two minimum. So, and lastly, how are they different from each other? And you can conclude with some, and conclusion is another issue. You are not concluding at all. In optional, introduction and conclusion tell the examiner whether or not you have understood it. So, 2 lines or 3 lines for intro and 2 or 3 for conclusion. That's the issue. So, in conclusion, you could have said both of them, and there was no discussion on magical religious practitioners. Yes or no? Religion, you have priests for magic, you have shamans or sorcerers or witches, and what is their corresponding status? Isn't it? That's a prominent omission in your answer.
Yes.
So, don't do such things. These are all basic things. You can't get any easier than this. Okay? Next, complementary filiation. This many students ignore because it's not straightforward topic. But you just make the effort to find some relevant material. It's very easy. What is complementary filiation? Or what is complementary filiation? Relationship with the usually patrilineal descent. Males also, people also have the kinship ties with the matrilineal descent. That is complementary filiation. So you have to write what is the definition and the importance of why is there complementary filiation. What's the need for complementary filiation?
Social.
Yes. Okay.
Social integration, and then in the matrilineal society, fathers love towards his children will be
Okay.
some rights and rituals are forced for other from
Yes.
matrilineal side as well.
Yes.
So this is by J2.
This is by
J2, J2.
Goody. Yes. Namma, you wrote something. There is your script. Your answer for this was good. The Goodian complementary filiation was proposed by descent theorists. Mayor Fortes. Descent theorists and we have 2 people. Mayor Fortes and Evans Pritchard. These are descent theorists. So, generally we assume that in UDGs there is no relation with the, if it is matri with father's lineage, if it is patri with mothers. But this is an exception. Complementary filiation shows that groups also have ties, and one important reason for this is that in a descent group there is no individuality. Because everybody has the same descent group, and descent group tends to be hierarchical and authoritative. Whereas complementary filiation, each person has a unique affiliation. So it helps them meet their personal, psychological, emotional needs. In complementary descent group is based on authority. Complementary filiation is based on emotional needs. So people's emotional needs are met through complementary filiation in a rigidly hierarchical UDG society. That's it. That's complementary filiation. Nothing but straightforward. With examples. Next, pastoralism. Again, very straightforward question. Here both of you here, your definitions were not to the point. You are using general language to describe economic activity, pastoralism. And in all your content, pastoralism is a very straightforward question. Yes or no? The features for this are very clear. What they do, dependence on animals. One very important point about pastoralism is 2 things. Others you will write. Trade. Trade is very important to them. Why is trade very important in pastoral society?
Therefore, yes. That's a make
And there is surplus, or why is trade very important?
and one more is they need some carbohydrates. Yeah, protein
Relationships, social.
No, pastoral societies are the only society which is not self-sufficient. All they have is animal product. So for other foods, they have to trade. So pastoral society works on the basis of trade. Trade is very, very important for them. Otherwise, they cannot survive because all they have is meat, dairy, and some animal products. But there is food. So they trade and survive. And the other thing about pastoralism is feuding. Generally, we see feuding at a higher rate in pastoral societies. And here, I was surprised why none of you discussed things like their level of technology, the level of the kind of ownership of property. Are they nomadic or not? What is the kind of political leadership they have? This is a basic expectation, right? And some examples for Indian pastoral societies, pastoralism outside India. And if you are smart enough, you could have added present status of some pastoral societies. Increasingly, pastoralism is becoming unviable because these are largely nomadic people, and the open lands are reducing. In Indian case, for example, Bakarwals is a famous pastoral group in Kashmir. Even their governments are trying to settle down these nomadic groups.
So climate change affect nutrition, grass,
ಇದು point తీసుకొని include it as a conclusion. Pastoralism in present. Next, human rights and culture led. This is a slightly analytical question. It's not straightforward. So you must be able to think. First, definition of culture relativism. And when you talk about culture relativism, which thinker should come to your mind? Franz Boas. Where is Franz Boas' answer? He is the most important proponent of this idea. And whenever you talk about cultural relativism, you must also mention about ethnocentrism, the opposite, because cultural relativism emerged to handle ethnocentrism. That must be there. Then, in the context of human rights violations, take some examples. How do human rights violations happen because of ethnocentrism? Imposition of one culture on the other. Take 3-4 genocides. The easiest way to write this is take genocides. Because genocides happen due to persecution. Genocides are examples of persecution. Take Indian examples of from Indian neighborhood. Pakistan. Bangladesh was bifurcated because of persecution. Persecution is a big issue in Middle East today. The Kurds are fighting for a Kurdistan because of persecution. So, ethnocentrism breeds intolerance towards others. And nation states which fail to be ethnocentric, which fail to take a culture relativist attitude, use state power to impose one culture on the society. And that can lead to enormous human rights violations.
Chinese Uyghur Muslims.
Yes, the biggest persecution that we are seeing is Uyghurs. Very good. And ultimately, it will lead to transforming multicultural societies to monocultural societies.
Monocultural societies lead to stagnation of.
Yes. You can take that line and conclude. Clear? So, not very difficult. Easy to write very 150 words, but this is basic. Define, thinker, its comparison with ethnocentrism, and present relevance. And if you are smart enough, you could have added UN HDR. Yeah. How UN Human Rights Declaration takes essentially a culture relativist attitude to the world. So, right? And then Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. This is from linguistic anthropology. So, This is a very important. This has been asked 1 year also, and it's a very important concept in language linguistic anthropology. So your answer was very good. What did you write for cyberwar hypothesis? Yes.
Strong version.
Yes, but how did you define it? How did you define cyberwar hypothesis? What was the definition for cyberwar?
Explain the relationship between the language, thought, and culture.
Very good. So what is cyberwar trying to say? Relationship between language and
Language, culture, and thought process.
primarily culture. Yes, through thought process. What does it say?
Two linguistic determinism and linguistic relativism. Two concepts. Children,
No, give it me simple.
simple two concepts of language. Linguistic determinism.
Don't use words now. Give me the meaning.
Language decides how we think. First thing.
Language.
Decides how we think.
Hmm.
The second thing is
Zero.
people who are thinking differently. So who speak differently also think differently.
Very good. That's what. So, this is good because in the very beginning she said it is also known as linguistic relativity hypothesis. That's how you must begin your introduction. And we trying to order the arrows petals, right? In full paragraphs. It refers to the proposal that particular language that a person speaks influences the way they think about reality. Isn't it? That's all there is. So you are saying language shapes culture. But the language we speak shapes our thinking and hence shapes our culture. That is the essential meaning. But nobody here gave me examples to support this. Number, we have many examples. Yes?
Some color coding of study by the
War.
and there is ice in the sea, like they have different terms for snow, different terms for snow.
Yes.
Because they have only one term. So since they have different terms, they can recognize different
Specificity. Correct.
So they think thought process is decided by language.
Thought process is made language. Exactly. So if you have a language, one classic example that many you can also quote in easy examples are, for example, English language. Study shows that speakers of English language are more likely to have hierarchy mindset. Speakers of Hebrew language are more likely to think in terms of gender. So you can take such examples to support this idea. But is this idea absolute? Then the counter with criticism. The idea that language shapes culture, you can say language influences thought and culture to an extent, but not that language determines culture. And there is also the reverse hypothesis that culture shapes the language. And first of all, how do we trace all this?
That is a part of
Culture is a part of language, and how do we trace its impact? So,
social.
we can't be very specific. So, these are all issues. That's why Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, though, shed some light on the relationship between these two, we cannot be very sure of the specific nature in which they are expecting it to be. That's the conclusion. So, Sapir and Whorf definition, examples, explore the idea, flip side, and critique and balance it. That's all. Next, bilinear and bilateral dissonance. Again, very straightforward. I don't know why both of you are difficulty in this. So, what is bilinear? Yes. What is bilinear? Who proposed bilinear dissent? In which society? What is the example that we use to understand? Yes. There are two, Yago and Ashanti, primarily. So bilinear dissent means people trace dissent from both sides, male and female side. The key word is simultaneous operation of both matrilineal as well as patrilineal dissents. That is the keyword. So, and on matrilineal they get some statuses, on parity they get some other statuses. What they exactly get. And the example for this is Ashanti. So, until then it was thought that there is only unilinear or there is only unilinear descent. But the discovery of Ashanti showed that they have societies can operate in a bilinear way. That's all. What is bilateral descent? Bilateral? What is bilateral descent?
It's a kindred actually, not a descent.
It's not descent exactly, it's a bilateral kinship. That is, it is not associating with line of relatives vertically in terms of back in time and future, but it is associating horizontally, sideways. And bilateral kinship lead to formation of groups called kindreds. And discuss about kindred. Kindred is ego-centered, it is not fixed, changes from purpose to purpose, and so on. And it's a very fluid group with no name, title whatsoever. That is bilineal bilateral descents. So this is more of a conceptual test than really real difficulty in the paper. Okay. Then we studied non-verbal communication. Again, this is from linguistic anthropology. Very easy. What is non-verbal communication? Different types of non-verbal communication, including silence. But what you could have included, I think your answer was good here. What you would have included is, along with non-verbal communication, you can also include non-human communication. As a part of this, you can also include non-human communication. The usual content, along the usual content like kinesics, para-language, body movements. Along with this, just add non-human communications as part of non-verbal communication as well. And of silence. Silence, I think, was there in your answers. Right? And we conclude with how non-verbal communication can be an effective tool for cultural understanding of cultural meanings. Next, segmental lineage and territorial. This is where both of you would improve a lot. I think I say your answer to be better. Can you just open the answer? So this is a very conceptual question, and in fact, you should not. Your preparation for political anthropology is not complete without reading this. So where does this topic segmental lineage fall?
Yeah.
Now, what is? Where do you see this? It's part of tribal political system. Segmental lineage is part of this system, tribal system. So your answer should be start with segmental lineage is a way to organize tribal political system. And what is a tribal political system? Where groups associate temporarily for a purpose, and after the purpose has disappeared, the association again disperses. So groups which live in isolation can unite for a particular purpose, and then they again disperse after the purpose has been served and met. That's tribal system. And tribal system can be of two types, based on kinship, based on age. Based on kinship, we have segmental lineages. And this diagram which you find in number and number must be there. I think Suresh went effort to draw, but both of you did not. This diagram. Is there a number and number? Very popular for this answer. And whenever you talk about segmental lineage, Javan's Pritchard must come. He studied this among the Nouvelle and Teef. No, there's a lot of content, number and number only. But we didn't write it. Noor and Teef, they have this. So what is the system? The keyword here is, there is a keyword, complementary opposition. So how do these lineages connect with each other? How do the different lineages associate, unite in a fight? Based on the principle of complementary opposition. That is, They are uniting in a fight not based on right and wrong, but based on kinship distance. Each group affiliates with the nearest kinship group to unite in a fight against the opposition. So where is that? That is a minimum expectation in this answer. So in your answer, I was looking for the word, but it's not there. And what is territoriality? It is how lineages are mapped across a territory. So lineages which are closer to each other are also neighbors. Those who are neighbors are also close to each other through kinship ties. That's the meaning. Which helps them mobilize quickly in the face of war or attack. You can confront with an example of how this is a superior system. In fact, Richard himself talks about one society, the Dinka. Dinka are neighbors to the Nuer. But Dinka have band system, but Nuer have segmental lineages. As a result, Nuer have had better military success over Dinka repeatedly, and they have grabbed a lot of the territory.
Dinka is
Dinka is?
age.
No, that is Karimojong. Dinka have no such unity. Karimojong have age limits. So we can quote this example. That is the expectation for this answer. Right? So these are all basics. So if you read the basics well, there is no scope for innovation also. It's just reading the basic sources well, understanding it, and organizing your content. Next, chiefdom. Even here, there is a lot of scope for improvement in understanding. What is chiefdom? I think one of you is a state system. Yeah. Yes. How is chiefdom state system? State is a different system. Yeah. Band, tribe, chiefdom, state. Chiefdom is a centralized system, not state system. Whereas band and tribe are uncentralized systems. Chiefdom is a centralized system. That is the first difference. And there is usually a chief. Then the rest is fine. The rest I think you wrote, Bharat. The chief, there can be multiple chiefs. Chief can have council or not have a council. Next, another keyword that I was looking for while writing chiefdom is mana. How do chiefs make their positions? How do chiefs draw legitimacy? A lot of chiefs use the saying we have mana. We have special power which makes us eligible to be in this position. Because others will question, on what basis are you claiming to be chief? So the issue of legitimacy of a chief is a question. And the other important thing in chiefdom is redistribution. Chiefs play a very important role in redistribution. Because societies with chiefdom also have redistributive economy. That is missing. It is not part of your answers. Okay? And examples of chiefdoms. And finally, you could have concluded with when do chiefdoms become state? When do chiefdoms become state? Could be the conclusion. As chief begins to, and another point is chiefs don't collect tax. They collect tributes, voluntary payments. So when the voluntary payment begins to become compulsory, and the chief is retaining a big share of what he is collecting, then the chiefdom is on the way to become a state. Classic example, in Rigvedic age you have chiefs, Rajan is a chief. But later Vedic age, Rajan becomes king. King is a state. That's why in Rigvedic system you only have tribute. But in later Vedic system you get tax.
Tax on.
Yes, but in Rigvedic age you don't have tax because Rigvedic stage society is at the level of chiefdom. But in later Vedic age you see the emergence of states. And chiefs don't maintain elaborate machinery like bureaucrats, priests, military. Chief faces warfare by mobilizing people. But as the chief begins to maintain huge subordinates, then we say that chiefdom is going to become a state. Here can examples of chiefdoms. Next, social stratification. This is a very easy question. Define it. What is not there in your answer is layer or strata. Society is not just both of you wrote hierarchy only. I think we are asking for strata, but you missed layers. So it is layered hierarchy, not just hierarchy. That is the key word. And then types of stratification. We have egalitarian, class-based, and rank-based. What are the three ways of classifying society? One are egalitarian, they have no stratification at all. Then you have rank-based societies. In fact, chiefdoms are rank societies. That is also that must be in your answer. Chiefdoms have rank. The chief at his lineage have higher rank, whereas everybody gets is like a lower rank. So rank societies and class is class system. Within class, one sub variety is caste. Then you can discuss the benefits of stratification and the problems. Here, if you have the extra reading ability, you could have quoted some sociology thinker who talks about stratification and its problems. Because this concept will give criticism from socio option, not an anthro option. Up to different types, you can use anthro, but for criticism, you can use, or the problems of stratification, you can use social thinkers. That is how you handle this question. Or even basic issues. You can just say that highly stratified societies are becoming even more unequal. For example, in India, because of the history of caste system, you could say that the rising inequality in India could be attributed to the history of caste system in India. That is very easy. Just applying some GS ideas to optional to write a decision conclusion. Even if you don't have the time and interest to explore other optional and draw content, you can just innovate by linking GS to this topic or linking paper to this topic. Yes? So always think in that dimension. How can you use paper 2 content in paper 1? How can you use paper 1 in paper 2? How can you use GS wherever to innovate? Because one blessing we have is that same examiner will not see Sanskrit subjects. So you won't know that they will not catch you if you recycle content. Isn't it? Because not say one person will catch all 7 papers. Each person is different. So use it to your benefit. Recycle content across papers. But don't recycle content within the same paper. Then you'll be caught. But if you can recycle across papers, nobody will catch you. So that's a system.
Thinking is we should be more focused on theory and method. This is optional.
No, in the conclusion.
Yes, in conclusion also shouldn't use an
Not
wrong
needed.
misinformation.
If you have done that, because in the conclusion there is no concept involved there. It is something you have to write on your own. After exploring the concept really well, conclude with some perspective.
Can we write marks for it?
Of course,
Marxists.
Marxists are against it. You can use Marxist theory. There is one social thinker I'm not able to tell and post in the group. 2 of them. Both of them. Yes. You can use them. Their perspective on stratification. So you can use them to support your view. Here, next, third A. Major approach to study religion. I'll give framework, but it's very easy to get the framework right. So basically, how many are there? Evolutionary, psychological, and functional. I was surprised we had difficulty with this question also.
Even structure and syntax will also be, but it's not.
Primarily not in a syllabus, so these 3 are enough. Evolutionary, who is the most important person here?
PPT.
PPT.
Fraser.
Here you must summarize his ideas. What is E.B. Taylor's approach to evolution? Akkada explanation is missing in or can you both your answers? You read this question, Suresh? Yes. But you could explain what is this death dream experience?
Since question is
At least draw a quick flowchart. So that is essence. So he realizes he's trying to, his whole approach is that religion is there to handle anxiety and unknown to handle the unknown. So primitive societies have a lot of unknown elements. Most serious of this is death and dreams. So he believes that religion was used to explain these two. And to explain these two, he believes that they invented the concept of soul. And he proposes that during dreams, soul leaves the body temporarily, during death, it leaves it permanently. Hence, there is a belief in souls called as animism. That's why Taylor believes animism is the earliest religion. Yes or no? And next, a student, who is a student? R.R. Marriott. Discuss R.R. Marriott's view. Here, Fraser is not needed. R.R. Marriott, Max Muller, Naturism, Auguste Comte, and lastly, quickly, just draw a table. And Emile Durkheim, he proposes that totemism is the earliest form, not animism, animatism, naturism, not fetishism. Just draw a table and finish it.
that can functionalism of the last step.
He believed this is the oldest religion. And psychological is the least, you should not the least space in your answer because this is outdated idea. Because you wrote about the old approach, that's what Freud proposed. Freud proposed a crazy idea, psychoanalytical idea, that is no longer accepted. But the students who are neo-Freudians, they have proposed the idea that all of what Freud said is, most of it is nonsense, but one point is relevant. That is that experiences in childhood have a bearing on adult personality. That point is the basis for psychological approach. So he believes that as a child, children look up to father as the all-knowing person. When they grow up as adults and they have problems, they still cannot look at their father for solution. So they have that aversion to childhood response to look for a fatherly figure for solution. So God is fashioned in the image of the father that they had as a child to look up to for problem solving. That is psychological approach. So Freud, the one contribution Freud made is that childhood experiences have an impact on adult personality, and that is now used for psychological approach in this way. Next is of course functional. No need for Brown. Functional, just talk about Durkheim and Malinowski. Durkheim talked about functions of religion from a social perspective. How religion, what is Durkheim's famous statement?
He is savior and
What is Durkheim's famous statement? And he talked about religion from individual's point of view. Durkheim's famous statement is religion, yes?
totem is the symbol of society and worship of society. Worship of totem is the worship of society.
Exactly. This is the famous idea of Durkheim. That religion is nothing but worship of society. He thinks you're worshipping God, but he says, no, you're not worshipping God. Your God is merely a symbol to society. In fact, Malinowski and Brown are students of Durkheim. They are inspired by Durkheim's ideas. So Durkheim is a very, very big figure compared to both of them. Nobody reads these two people outside anthropology. But Durkheim is read across social sciences for his studies. So he is very important. And you can mention Malinowski's theory briefly. This is a very content-heavy answer. So for this answer, you should have flowcharts ready, tables ready. This is a table. That's a flow chart. Otherwise, you won't be able to finish it in given time. That's the issue. Okay. Here, what is the framework for this answer? And we can control by some of this functional approach is increasingly as widely accepted as more relevant to understand. So this is the most important approach of all. Of them, Durkheim is the most. That is the way to handle this question. Next, major branches of linguistic Anthro discuss the language. This is very straightforward. Major branches are historical linguistics, descriptive linguistics, structural linguistics. Yes, that's all. And describe what each of them is. And now language and culture. Language next part is about language and culture. Here we can discuss this in various parts. One in the context of gender, in the context of class. These two are the most prominent examples. How men and women have different approaches to languages. How upper class speak in a particular way, lower class speaks in a particular way. So that's how the way you speak a language can convey a lot about your class position, about your gender. And of course, like we said, age also. So the way a language is used in a setting can convey many things about the society that is in question. This is the second part. So, not a very difficult question. Next, features of dissent and alliance theories in the context of kinship. So, in kinship chapter, there is a line called dissent and alliance theories. Many ignore it. So, you should not ignore it. This question can be asked. It was asked 1 year, can be asked again and again. So, this whole debate is about two approaches to studying kinship. Which is more important to study kinship, dissent or alliance? Dissent theorists propose that dissent is very important. Who are dissent theorists? And Pritchard, you answer Pritchard. Who are alliance theorists? Most important of them is Levi-Strauss. So, talk about dissent theorists. Dissent theorists believe that dissent is the basis of kinship. And you can explain why they believe so. Because they believe primarily in UDGs. Whereas Levi-Strauss believes that no, alliance is the basis of kinship. His theory is called alliance theory. And he looks at alliance, then just talk about Strauss's approach to kinship. Alliance is nothing but a way to exchange women across groups. And exchange can happen with two ways: generalized exchange, restricted exchange. And he proposes that finally, matrilineal cross-cousin marriages lead to stronger integration of society because they create longer cycles. That is his approach. But finally, who is right? The question is, can alliance be possible without dissent? Because after all, Strauss is saying marriage is nothing but exchange of women between groups. How does groups coming into origin first? Because dissent, isn't it? But can dissent groups survive on their own? Because of interest. So dissent groups get alliance. So both are needed for society. So what is the need for thinking who is right? We can just say both of them work together to create society. Yes? Here? Next. Next is economic anthropology. Principles governing production, distribution, and exchange. Very easy question. Both of you wrote something else. I gave framework in your answer. So what is this? Whenever you talk about this, you should talk about reciprocity, redistribution, market exchange. That is the key point. Production, you can just briefly mention, just draw a table and say hunting gathering, horticulture, pastoral, agriculture. But the focus must be more on distribution and exchange. We have these three. Now explain each of them. Reciprocity can be of three types again. Balanced, generalized first, balanced, and negative. And examples for each. Generalized reciprocity, you have meat sharing among whom. For balanced, you have judgment. What is the most important example for this? Most important example for this is, what is it? Pull-up of Malinowski. Those you get right, but this is most expected. Malinowski study of proprianders and their pull-up trade. That is the most important example for balanced reciprocity. Negative is just like stealing. Then redistribution. Here, all things move to a central authority from where they are again given back. Chiefdoms, example. And market exchange. Then finally, conclusion. You can say how today all three will be present in one society, but increasingly societies are relying more on market exchange because every society is getting commercialized. As they're commercializing, there is more shift towards market exchange. And here we can talk about what is market exchange and money system and two types of money. General purpose money and special purpose money. That's all. So this is the framework. So you need to have this frameworks in mind. So the question is asked, you should not be running from pillar to post for a framework. Here, this is the most popular question in entire economic anthropology. And this is also like the other question. You have read a lot in very short time. So, if you are very well prepared, those are well prepared will dump content and probably get 15 or 20. Because here, if you write all of this, they have to give you 15 or 20. But those who are struggling will get 8, 9. So, in questions where a lot of content has to be written in a very short space and time, preparation makes a lot of difference. Those are very well prepared will reap the dividends here.
Kula trade lo bargaining aspect and balance and reciprocity lo bargaining aspect. Actually, Kula had under ceremonial exchange.
No, Kula is balanced reciprocity.
I mean, bargaining is one of the chief characteristics of the balanced reciprocity, but Kula is more of a ceremonial in nature.
Kula is some, when in materials law, they have taken old and have created a new version called ceremonial exchange.
Maybe
But
only
strictly speaking, there is no system called ceremonial exchange here. Is there?
but there is another trade, I don't know how to pronounce it. GMWALI. GMWALI.
Muali.
Yes. This is the trade actually happens after the Kula exchange.
No, Muali is one of the objects in Kula trade. Muali refers to white shell armbands.
Solvi and Mali, it's different, sir. Again.
Okay. Yes, that is Kula object.
Solvi and Mali is Kula object. It's actually, I mean, it's more of a trading aspect. Kula mostly of ceremonial inside scale.
Yes.
But in Mali, there is, I mean, economic aspect, like material.
No, in Kula, there is ceremonial exchange between the two Kula partners. But everybody who comes with them actually trade.
There is for Mali, sir. There's another separate term.
No, you can, okay, if you are calling it differently, that is fine. But here, for this, I think the best reference is number and number. In number and number, we classify balanced reciprocity under Kula is part of balanced reciprocity. What some old materials have done is they created a new category under balance called ceremonial exchange, and they have given Kula as an example to that. But in all the latest editions of number and number, they have removed any such terms. There is no term called ceremonial exchange, and I usually don't want to use it because it has never been asked also. Sometimes, even if it is not part of the latest books, if it is asked in the exam, then we will be forced to prepare for it. But so far, it has never been asked. And in all the updated versions, in number and number 12, 13, 14, 15, they have not included that word. So, you have simplified it and removed it, and we are just calling Kula as part of balanced. In fact, Kula is the most predominant example for balanced reciprocity. The system among Todas was devised and studied after Kula has been studied by Malinowski. They realized that even Indian tribes go for some kind of non-monetary exchange among themselves, and in that sense, they have come up with that the tribes of Nilgiris, all four of them coming into an arrangement, Toda, Kota, and Badagas, how they exchange among themselves. But that is modern on Kula trade, and Kula is the flagship example for this answer. So if you don't write this, if you write this, you get +1 because they expect this is a very important study, the most important study by Malinowski, the study of the Trobriand economy. So wherever you find the opportunity to put this word, put it. Don't find a substitute because a substitute is a poor substitute. It's a very important study. That's why if you have the opportunity, it must be part of your answer. That's the reason that materials have not been updated. They will be probably prepared in 2000s, and everybody has been following the same. And this is the consequence, the problem and is the consequence of that. So, for balanced reciprocity, the best example is flood. If you have doubts, just check once with environment because I think that is the final source for us to draw content here, and that is listed. If you actually have time, you can also draw a diagram: kinship and reciprocity. Partial silence. Who gave this division? Threefold division. Which anthropologist classified simple economies into reciprocity, redistribution, market exchange? Yes. Carl Polanyi. And again, within it, Marshall Sahlins and Elmer Service studied the link between kinship and reciprocity. And you can draw a diagram. Closest kin, generalized. Next kin, balanced, negative. Strangers, negative. So that's how you write a lot of content, right? Next. Sacred and profane in the context of religion. This is a question which most anthropology students get wrong. So, my instruction to you, if you are getting any question on Durkheim, totemism, sacred, profane, if you individual choice, you leave it. Because to write good answer, you need socio content for it. Either you study from socio, friends, or leave it. Sacred and profane is not just about water, temple, building, and all of that. Durkheim proposes that across the world, he realizes there is a dichotomy common to all religions, that is sacred and profane. He realizes that sacred are objects like stones, some water, or whatever. After observing them, he questions, why is this water sacred? Why is this stone sacred? Is it because it has special properties? Is the water having extra minerals to make it sacred? Nothing, it's common water. It is sacred because everybody has agreed that this is sacred. That is the source of sacredness. Here, another term must come: collective conscience. Society as a whole has given this object sacred nature. And what is the source of this sacred? Collective conscience. But why are they calling this particular thing sacred? Many things. The sacred is usually a symbol. Durkheim then asks, what is this a symbol for? What is the sacred a symbol for? To understand this, he studies totemism. Because totemism, according to Durkheim, is the simplest religion in the world. So if you understand what is the nature of the symbolic equation in a totemist society, he thinks he'll actually get it in any society. So he studies totemism, and there he realizes that totems are at the same time clan symbols. Totems are symbols of clans. Yes, they are clan symbols, and totems are also symbols for religion. So Durkheim then asks, if totem is at the same time a clan symbol as well as a religious symbol, is it not because both are same? That is, he then concludes that by worshipping totem, they are not actually worshipping that animal or that plant, but worshipping society. Because totem also is symbol for clan. That is, clan is nothing but society. Because in the Australian Aborigines, they don't have complex society. Society is only based out of clans. So Durkheim concludes that totem is a symbol for clan or symbol for society and symbol for religion as well. So if it is say both. Hence he concludes that yes, religion is nothing but worship of society. That is the whole sacred profane equation. Most Anthro students don't get this part. They only study sacred is not because of this, profane is that, profane is mundane, profane can be done this, sacred you can't do that. How that is written, but this is never discussed. Then your answer will clearly appear very shallow. That's why either get the whole picture and write or don't write. Because Durkheim's concepts, all these three go together. Is functionalism, is concept of sacred, profane, is concept of totemism, all of them go together. They are all organically connected. You can't write one without the other. Okay, we'll try to make it fast. Clear? Next, kinship terminology. This is not a highly analytical question. Here, you must just trace the history of how different thinkers have approached the study of kinship terminology. Starting with Morgan. Morgan was the first, and then you had Grover, and then you have Radcliffe Brown. And none of these studies gave any meaningful results. And today, finally, we just stick with 6 systems of kinship terminology. That is, the modern systems: Eskimo, Sudanese, Hawaiian, Crow, Omaha, and Iroquois. That's the list. So, all these studies to identify determinants have not really given any meaningful, conclusive evidence. So, today, the search for determinants has been set aside. And we just identify that there are 6 systems of kinship terminology across the world. That's the conclusion. If the question is on kinship terminology exclusively, we just write the 6 systems and draw the diagrams. But here, since it is not exclusively on that, at least mention them without diagrams. That's all. So here, it's all about tracing the history of various kinship terminology studies. Next, this is a very challenging question, 5th A. The impact of industrialization, urbanization, and feminism on the institution of family. Now, entire chapter on family, this is the most important question. Why? Contemporary. Most important because it's contemporary. So all the point and whenever you see the word family, don't think in terms of only family service. Family includes marriage also. So you must write changes that are happening in marriage as well. Marriage, family, as well as women. All three are connected. Here, both of you wrote content. I think you wrote this answer, right? But the analysis was shallow. The sense that we're talking about mechanization, you're giving not the core issues. Core issues for this answer, basically, you can analyze a change in family in terms of some dimensions. First, what are the new forms of family and marriage? That's first thing. Next, how is, sorry, you last one. First, talk about how the structure is changing. Structure of family and marriage. What is the change? Next, functions. Along with structure, what are the changes in the functions of marriage and family? Third, what are the new forms of marriage and family that are emerging? The three angles to ask the answer problem. In addition to what you already read, what you already writing.
School of thoughts.
He framed up the pattern. Look good. Structure కింద జాయింట్ న్యూక్లియర్ నుంచి or large extent నుంచి న్యూక్లియర్ అవుతుంది. దాంట్లో ట్రెండ్స్
Family production.
yes. And here one important figure that many Anthro students have no idea about, but who if you write you will get extra marks is Talcott Parsons. He is also a famous sociology thinker. So, he is a professor of sociology in Harvard and he is the most cited scholar for studies on family and marriage systems. Talcott Parsons, with respect to structure, he says that society is increasingly moving towards nuclearization. He calls it isolated nuclear family. He calls it isolated nuclear family. And he believes that this is going to be the future because given the nature of industrialization and urbanization, where there is need for mobility, geographic as well as social. Both these mobilities are easier only with nuclear family. And with respect to second, functions, also Talcott Parsons is relevant. He calls that, he uses one word, he says there is something called as structural differentiation. He gives a word called structural differentiation. He says earlier, family used to perform multiple functions: economic, social, religious, educational, everything was family. But with the rise of specialized institutions like schools, colleges, workplaces, child care centers, family is no longer performing all these functions. He calls this structural differentiation. It is a trend where there are specialized institutions to take care of each area. And as a result of structural differentiation, family's functions are reduced to the very core. Emotional functions, psychological functions. And under new forms of family, you can write a lot. Single parent families, live-in relationships, same-sex marriages and families. You can talk about also something that maybe you will not be aware of. Blended family. What is a blended family? Second marriages. Stepmother, stepson. There's a movie, Gada. There's an example. His children, her children, and their children. That is a blended family. Because as marriages rise, as remarriages happen, then the consequence will be blended family. And fourth dimension that you can write is marital breakdown. So it is not asked, you can include this in the book. How divorce rates are increasing. Marital breakdown is another important consequence of all these changes. Yes or no? Yes. Then the question that comes is, despite all these changes have given rise to the question that is family, does it have future? Then you can cite the evidence that though there is rise in divorce rate, there is also rise in remarriage rate. So what does it tell us? Family and institution is cut. People are trying to get lucky, like you are trying, second, third attempt. You are trying to get married, second, third, fourth time to get lucky. So this shows that we have not found an alternative to family and institution. That's it. This is core essential core. And the additional we have not parallel. But we may you are writing second points. Dependence on children, taking care of elders. It does not, it shows that you are not able to look at the key issues. These are the key issues. Does it look like these are the key issues now? They are managed by trends. And if you write Anthro parcels, you will get unique points because nobody will write in Anthro. And probably they would not have heard about him anyway. But he's a very, very important person. Clear? Next. 5B is very straightforward. So we discuss this also preferential marriage with examples. What are various differential marriages? Cousin marriages, two types, cross cousin, parallel cousin, levirate, sororate. Define what is preferential marriage. And cousin marriages law, again cross cousin law, give two examples, matrilineal cross cousin, patrilineal cross cousin, and parallel cousin. What diagram of each? Examples. And the parallel cousin marriages happen only in certain pastoral Muslim Islamic societies, where because of feuding, group loyalty is more of a consideration than incest taboo considerations. So if the women are married in outside group, that can lead to divided loyalty of the woman. So to make loyalty clear, they go for parallel marriages. Levirate, sororate, diagrams of both. And you can also add what both of you missed is, levirate, sororate are secondary marriages, and the primary purpose is not marriage, is to provide social security. That's the motive of both. Especially levirate more so. Levirate primary purpose is not for companionship or marital bond. It's more of a social security mechanism for the widowed woman in the family and her children.
Return of bride price is relevant. So they
Right, but
want to keep the
not-
inside the.
Not a very strong issue. Here, last, social control. Now, many students don't read definition of social control. Yes, what is the definition?
Behavior and to maintain the social unity.
Not control, conform. Social control is social mechanisms to make sure members of a culture conform to the cultural norms. That is social control. And there, in simple societies, you can talk about how social control is used more as an effective tool than punitive measures. And types of social control, diagram ఉంటుంది. Diffused mechanisms. First, social control of two types. Sanctions. This is a complex diagram. Social controls can be sanctions, which are punishments.
Positive and negative.
Sanctions can then be broken down into diffused and organized. They can be further broken down into positive and negative. And దానికి examples అన్ని వస్తాయి మీరు రాసినవి. Ridicule, gossiping, mockery, ostracization, punishments like house destruction, penal feasts, oath and audience.
Penal feast can example right.
Penal feasts?
Example right.
It is there in one famous Central Indian tribe, the Kamar. Kamar. It's also there in Nagas. You'll get examples for this in Magar and Mazumdar. Lot of an example for social control you'll get in Magar and Mazumdar. And then you can conclude as society moves from simple to complex, social control mechanisms change. And law becomes more relevant. So you learn questions, so you should think in terms of change also. Simple to complex, and how does this change? That's another way to look at it. So that's the question. So whatever is the question in Anthro, keywords, frameworks. Keywords and frameworks give you control over the content and what you are writing. Clear? Yes. So, any other question before we close? I hope this helped you and help you address my test. Primarily look for 2 or 3 things. First, are you getting review on how you are writing? Are you able to look at the content differently? And third, are you getting new content? So these are the 3 things you can take from my test series: a review or a critique of your writing style. Second, how controlled you have over your content, review on your content along presentation. Third is, are you getting any fresh ideas, fresh inputs? That's okay. So I try to make sure all 3 are satisfied. Right? I hope our online student, he has been very keen on this session, so I hope you also. Vinay, I hope. Any doubts, Vinay, before we close?
Thank you.
Your script, Suresh, I'll give it to you. Maybe Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay? Right? Shall we call it a day then?
Yes.
Right. మీరు కొంచెం బాగా రాయండి, మీరు రైటింగ్ ఇస్ గుడ్. అది పాయింట్ గా పెట్టి అలా చేయండి. You writing complete paragraph or put a heading and write as bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4 ABC. A star will have a better. Okay?